Welcome back to the Ag Bowl Podcast. I am your host, Tommy Grisafi, and I have a special guest today, Mr. Don Wick from the Red River Farm Network. Today's podcast is being filmed, and you'll be able to hear it both audio, and you'll be able to watch it video. And it's being filmed in beautiful downtown Mayville, North Dakota. Don Wick, welcome to the podcast.
Well, I'm pleased to be here. It's exciting to see what you're doing here.
This is take two. We've done this before.
We did. It's been a few months, but yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, well, we got a few bugs to work out, so it's what we're doing. All right. The reason I wanted to have you down here, of course, is I've traveled with you across North Dakota and all over the Midwest, and you've been to where I live, and I've spent a lot of time where you live. And I personally have watched you interview hundreds of people, hundreds. And I would say at this point in your career, because this isn't your first rodeo, you've probably interviewed tens and tens of thousands of people. Is that correct?
I've been doing this 40 years, so you're probably right with the math, yeah.
Yeah. And when I go to learn about you, now I know a little about you because I've spent a couple hundred hours in the pickup with you, but the only time I've ever really seen you talk about yourself is when you were at the award you received at the National Association of Farm Broadcasters, right?
Yeah.
They do this little 5-6 minute YouTube video about Don Wick and where he grew up. I was thinking, all of you folks in ag media or any media personality, unless you're out on TikTok putting out reels and everything else, telling everyone what you ate for breakfast, no one really knows anything about you. Of course, you're always trying to get the story and the beat, and you're out there, it says Red River Farm Network reporting agriculture's business, right? But I don't think people know a lot about you, and you have an interesting story, and I'd like you to tell people a little bit about Mr. Don Wick.
I'm much more comfortable being on that side of the microphone, asking questions rather than answering them. But,
I'm going to put on my glasses so I can see how handsome you are.
Yeah, right. You talked about the video. I was honored to be inducted into the National Association of Farm Broadcasting Hall of Fame. It's probably been 5-6 years ago already. But, yeah, that's one of those times when they take a look back on your career and where you started. So it's always kind of fun to go back and look at that.
And where'd you grow up, Don?
Elmo, Wisconsin. So western Wisconsin, right on the Mississippi River. Grew up on a small dairy farm, actually a pretty diversified farm. We had everything from chickens to hogs to beef cattle, but dairy was the primary
That was probably common in the day, huh?
Yeah, exactly. That's the bluff country of western Wisconsin. Beautiful, beautiful area. And now I found my way into the flatland of North Dakota and northwest Minnesota.
Well, you just skipped from where you grew up to getting here. I'm not going to let you off that easy. There's a bunch of stuff in the middle, but I do have a question for you. When you go back home, there's not I think I drive through that area. There's not a lot of dairies. That area has changed. That's corn and bean country, right?
Well, extreme western Wisconsin, because it's bluff country, it's very hilly ground, so it really is well suited to dairy production. But the dairy industry certainly has changed. When I grew up, we had a 50-cow dairy herd, and that would have been pretty typical. Now you're seeing dairies that are 500 cows, 1,000 cows. You're seeing 5,000-cow dairy herds. It's because of the scale of production that you need in agriculture today, that dairy industry has changed dramatically.
And when you went to high school and you went to university, how did you pursue journalism and particularly ag journalism, a very specific subject?
I don't have some fancy degree, so I went to high school, and while I was working in high school, I worked at a meat market, of all things, and the local radio station, which is about 10-15 miles away, came and did a radio remote at the meat market, and the owner, the butcher at the meat market, pushed me to be on air to do the radio interview, and the disc jockey at that time said,
wasn't Larry Lujak or anyone like that.
But he said, hey, you did all right. I think you should come in. We've got part-time hours. You can work on weekends here. And so
I've never heard this story.
In high school, I started working Saturdays and Sundays at KWMB, the Voice of the Valley in Wabasha, Minnesota.
That's awesome. And then let's go through the whole, much like kind of like when someone becomes a weather person, they start at a little station and they go medium. And then let's go through the lineup here.
So
I have time.
I went to Brown Institute, which doesn't exist any longer, but a broadcasting school. it's a 9-month program, but I had a job waiting for me, so I was able to get out early actually, and came back to that little radio station in Wabasha, and small station, little 1,000-watter, and I was the morning disc jockey, I was the news director, I was the farm director, I took out the garbage, I did whatever had to be done. We literally had 2 full-time announcers at the radio station. So I worked there for just over a year, actually, and then I had a move to Austin, Minnesota, and then on to Redwood Falls, Worthington, and Yankton, South Dakota, and then on to WCCO in Minneapolis before coming to Grand Forks, North Dakota, and the Red River Farm Network some almost 20 years ago.
Wow. Now, when you came up here, did you realize it was cold?
Yeah. Well, it's cold where I came from as well, but the wind blows a whole lot harder here than it did.
It hurts. It hurts when there's a couple months here that you really have to ask why you're up here. Seriously ask why you're up here. But other than that, you have a quick commute. You live in Grand Forks. You could almost walk to work if you were in the mood.
I'm about a block and a half from
You
our
could walk,
office.
but I think you
I
drive
don't.
that little Jeep over there. This career in ag broadcast, you and I had spoke at Big Iron last week. You had a very successful Big Iron Farm show, and we were talking about who's new and up and coming in ag broadcasters, and we kind of stumbled. Not like it just it's not dying, but it's an incredible amount of work. You get up at 3 a.m.
I do, but I love getting up at 3 a.m. I love my job. I now own the network after being here for a number of years. I bought a small piece when I came here, and now we have ownership of the network, and I'm involved in sales and management, but I still got that ego and want to be on the air, so I come to work early and work for the morning show and prep for that from 3:30 to 6:30 until we're on the air when that sounder rings or goes on the air at 6:30 in the morning.
One thing I have to ask people and clarify, when I ask you what is the Red River Farm Network, when I first met you, sillyly, I didn't know, I really thought you were the radio station. And if I was like looking for where do I find you on the FM dial, and you could find you on a lot of FM dials and a lot of AM dials. There's people listening to this on the audio version of the podcast. Explain to them what you do different than maybe here in Mayville, North Dakota, we have 105.5.
Right.
We could put on, I could hear your voice on there, but not all day long.
So basically, we produce a syndicated radio program. We produce 12 radio shows a day, a half-hour morning broadcast, a half-hour noon broadcast, and markets that extend from the open through the close. So 5-minute updates at the bottom of each hour. And we're on 21 radio stations across portions of Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Our whole focus, you mentioned it, reporting agriculture's business, and I think that's really what differentiates us from a lot of the others that are out there. We're not very good at feature stories, those warm, fuzzy stories. I had someone that called us the Wall Street Journal of Agriculture once, and I think that's just the best compliment because that's what we do is report business. Farmers are business people, and that's our emphasis. We put a lot of focus on those pocketbook type issues that impact that grower, whether it's the markets or what's going on in the weather here at home or in South America or Ukraine or wherever. And we talk about what's going on in the financial markets. We talk about what's going on in policy. That's important to any farmer up and down our listening area.
Well, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about that awesome trip you took with, would it be the now head of the USDA when you went to Afghanistan?
Correct.
Tell that story when they put the vest on you.
Okay, so
And it wasn't Patagonia.
the first time around for Secretary Vilsack, he took a trip to Afghanistan. So I got a call on a Wednesday morning.
You're like, Afghanistan's great this time of year. I'm going.
Exactly.
Right.
Someone I knew at USDA called me and said, hey, the Secretary is taking a trip into the war zone, and we'd like you to come along. It's like, can I have a little bit to think about this? So I called my wife right away. And
Good call.
She said, yeah, when do you get an opportunity like this, right? So I got the call Wednesday. Friday, I flew out to D.C., 7 o'clock, I think, on Saturday morning. We were getting on the plane at Andrews Air Force Base, actually Air Force Two. We flew to Afghanistan, and the secretary, we stayed at the embassy grounds, and we spent about 5 days in Afghanistan, most of it right there in Kabul, but we also went down to Helmand Province and met with troops there. And there's some folks that they're trying to start really that connection, like an extension service, maybe to educate the Afghan folks from raising poppies and trying to get them to raise wheat or a crop like that. I'm not sure how much success they had in that, but that was really part of the focus that we had there. But the best story, I was flying there, and the Secret Service, one of the guys said, "Hey, if they offer you a flak vest, they're doing it for a reason, so put it on." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you for that one." So we get off the plane, and they hand you the vest, and basically you wore that for the rest of the 5 days that
you didn't get
we were
to
there.
complain about what color it was or
No,
anything else. No, put it on. That's wild. And then, was it scary? I mean, the flight, you said when they went to land, they land. They don't. This isn't a stow your tray tables type of flight.
No, they kind of go in, corkscrew kind of in. They land, you get off, and that plane takes off, because having Air Force Two sitting on that tarmac, it would be a target, obviously. So that plane took off just about as soon as we landed. And scary, yeah. You're driving. They had some military folks driving us from the airport to the embassy, and he's talking about, as soon as you get in the vehicle, what to do if we happen to get hit by a roadside bomb or something. And you're like, okay, I'm not in Grand Forks, North Dakota any longer. Frankly, driving in Kabul was probably the scariest we had the whole time. We go down to Helmand Province and met with the troops, and we went to a little village there. That stuff was just, I found very interesting. I love that.
How was the food? That's how I'm thinking. What'd you eat?
They
Left some to be desired.
They had the locals at some of the tribal folks that served our group, and I just had to laugh. They served us chicken and rice and bread, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I won't go all into it. But yeah, it was a totally an experience. Yeah.
That's awesome. What else? Panama Canal? Did you go there?
No, never did. Been
could be on your bucket list.
Afghanistan. I've been to China. Done Cuba twice. Europe, Japan. Lots of different places. This business gives you an opportunity for travel.
That's wonderful. I wrote on my list of questions, radio past in 2022. So when you look at radio in your 40-year career, what's changed and what's new, and what is it different? I mean, this mic that we're talking on has been around for 30 years. I mean, what's changing in radio?
The technology has changed. That's certainly a key. We look at how everything is digitized today. I can do
no more cut and tape.
Exactly. I used to do it with a razor blade and tape to go through a reel-to-reel, and now everything's done on the computer. And
when did that change, Don? You remember?
I suppose that would have been in the early to mid-'90s. I'm guessing mid-'90s when we transitioned over to probably late '90s, I'm guessing, when we transitioned over to digital editing. But it made life a whole lot easier, I'll tell you that.
There's some, and I think the pandemic made another jump step of folks like myself saying, I'm at home, looks like we're going to be here a while, let's buy a few mics, a recorder, maybe one camera, maybe two or three. And but then what I do hits a different crowd. I mean, I produce podcasts. I have no clue who's going to listen to it. Whereas you kind of know who's going to listen to your broadcast, correct?
You call it broadcasting. I like to think of it almost as narrowcasting, because we have
I'm not familiar with that.
Just that we have a very narrow audience, a niche that we're trying to talk to, and that's the farmer. We focus on the producer plus the stakeholders, I'd say, the ag business people, the people that are serving those farmers. So
Crystal Sugar folks, up and down the valley, all around.
Exactly. Like I said, it's big business. So there's a lot of folks that farmers, really.
But with the digitalization, I now have coworkers at work who listen to your broadcast all the time on the podcast version, that it goes out and then we can get a notification on a Spotify or something else, and we can listen to all your shows. That's bringing a crowd and a group in that you've never realized were probably listening. I mean, they couldn't have been if they weren't physically in their car or tractor around here 20 years ago. They didn't have access to you, right?
Exactly. That's a beautiful thing about the technology is we've been able to expand that audience beyond what the signal that radio station tower has been. So that gives us a brand new audience really all over the world. We can tell that story. We also report in other ways. You talked about social media. We produce an e-newsletter. We're really in the information business. Radio is our main job, but
And if people, go ahead and plug yourself a little bit, if people want to get on that list you have, that Red River list, do they go on your website and sign up?
Yes. We have an email newsletter called FarmNet News. We've been doing it here at the network since I came here about 20 years ago. And, yeah, you can go on to rrfn.com, and there's a little section where you can add your...
Subscribe now?
Subscribe to that email, correct.
That comes out every Monday.
It does.
Midday, yep.
Yep, and it's just a snapshot of what's going on in the world of agriculture.
Yeah. It's interesting that when we were at Big Iron last week and we did a broadcast, you and I received an email from someone in Brazil saying, "Great job, guys." And I believe you video streamed it live on YouTube. Right. And maybe there wasn't a huge audience when it was live, but that's out there forever. And they can go back. I can mail it to clients who could send it, but it's interesting. Now, you probably didn't, when this transition to Facebook and Facebook Live and all this, and you're very good at it now because I've been on the road and we produce some stuff together. I'm usually behind the scenes holding the camera or laughing. You're doing all the hard work. But how do you make this transition?
Like I said, I've been in the radio business. That's my focus. And actually, it was at Big Iron a number of years ago with a couple of millennials we had on staff that talked about needing to be on Facebook, doing maybe Facebook Live. And Randy Coonan, one of my other broadcasters, and myself of our generation, we were like kicking and screaming going into that. That's not something that we wanted to do, was the video. But frankly, it's been a very important part of what we do today, and it's just, like I said, another way to get that information out to our audience.
Fascinating. I can tell you from a positiveness of doing this podcast that I've received a few emails. I've received a few just random farmers. One of the things we do on this podcast is we like to give away a few things just to kind of see who's listening.
Yep.
And, one, we'd like to take you got to have advertisers, right? If we don't have advertisers, we can't do all this stuff. So I'd like to take a minute and thank my sponsor, Colorado Jack Popcorn. Colorado Jack is out of Leeds, North Dakota. They're producing popcorn, doing a good job doing it. They were supposed to get me samples. We're going to have samples on the table, the popcorn. But one thing, the local business owners in this area who were supportive of what we're doing here at the Ag Bull Podcast is I wanted to start something called Flags for Farmers. And if you're listening to this episode, within the first few weeks of this episode being released, I'm not sure how to rein it in and not give them away forever. But within the first few weeks of listening to this or watching it, if you email us at flags, FLAGS, at agbull.com, we'll send you a flag. And we have these beautiful flags. And people are writing in, and I'm sending flags to Upper Michigan, Colorado, California. I've never met any of these people, but somehow they searched the word agriculture either on a podcast link or a video, and they're finding us. Now, we've only produced a little content, but hopefully this will grow, and we'll see what happens.
You talked about how things have changed.
You're going to start interviewing me. I like this. Go ahead.
I would just say
I'd like to sit back myself.
A lot has stayed the same, and that's really it's all about providing information, and that hasn't changed. And I would also say that radio maybe is different today than it was 40 years ago when I started, but farmers still utilize terrestrial radio. They still tune in on the pickup, and they tune in in the combine or at home, whether it's listening before they head out for their day, if they're listening to our country morning broadcast or our midday show. Farmers are big users, big consumers of farm radio, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
I will say something that's probably going to make you giggle. Do you remember, like, maybe it was 10, 12 years ago, they talked about taking radios out of cars. Do you remember that? You're looking at me with that scared look like, Mom, I've done something wrong. Remember that? They're like, they were going to get...
Even that, yeah, it's been...
Like 7 years ago?
Yeah, it's been more recent than
I have to Google it. But they talked about getting rid of AM.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, what? Hello, there goes half our business. I don't think that's going to happen. And with the digitalization of everything, we also could just hit a button that would be AM radio. So as everything becomes internet-based, I listen to all types of different radio stations via the internet, but I'm backlinking to them. Is that correct?
I would say this still concerns me, though, about this idea of taking, say, the AM band out of the vehicle, because when you think of farmers, they always have a wheel in their hand, and that's when farm radio lives and breathes, is when you've got that wheel in your hand. You can do a lot of other things while you're driving the combine, driving in your pickup. You can be listening to those markets and hearing what's going on in farm news. We can provide that information, or you can be entertained as well through radio. Losing the AM band in a vehicle would be
That'd be bad.
Devastating, yes.
Yeah, well, let's hope that doesn't happen.
No.
But it was a hot topic there for a while. I do like watching you work. I've had the privilege of going on maybe 4 crop tours with you, and you're very, very good at it. And I can't explain it to someone till you try to interview someone like I'm trying to do now. And you're like, how does you sit down, you meet with someone, and do you have the list of questions in your head? I was listening to a podcast last night. This is so like off subject. Everyone's going to be like laughing. But you got to hear this. This guy was interviewing Ozzy Osbourne, and he was trying to ask Ozzy Osbourne how he becomes Ozzy. He's like, I just do it. And he's like, I've been doing this for 40 years. How do you become Don Wick? And you're like, I just do it. But how do you get ready to prepare and be like, all right, pulling up to Farmer's Yard. I know what I want to ask him. And then how do you execute that consistently with quality?
I think just like everybody else, you do your homework, you prepare,
I don't think Ozzy was prepared.
we like to make sure I carry a notebook with me, and I ask, I jot down notes a lot, and we put together questions that way. But a lot of it's just like you're doing, Tommy. It's listening, hearing what they have to say, and that's where you get your best questions.
Yeah, that came up on the podcast I was listening to. The podcast I was listening to last night was fascinating. It was why it wasn't easy to become Joe Rogan. And it goes through all the history of him. It took him like 5-6 years just to get on a stage to be a comedian. I don't think most people realize Joe Rogan is a comedian by trait. And I have to say, I really didn't know who Joe Rogan was. I really didn't until Elon Musk went there and I think he had a cigarette or a special cigarette or something. I'm like, you could do that on podcast and watch it? And that's probably not happening at the Red River Farm Network as much, but it's kind of like the Wild West out there on what they're doing versus it definitely lacks professionalism. I've listened to all types of various podcasts. I'm like, man, this guy's a hack. And that's probably what I'm going to sound like in the beginning. But I've also went back on people who are in agriculture doing podcasts. And I always like to go back and listen to episode 1 and then go listen to episode whatever, 400. And Joe Rogan, episode 1, and Joe Rogan, 1893 or whatever he's up to.
Right.
World of difference. And I imagine if you look back at a younger Don Wick, you weren't the shining star you were now. You probably thought you were hot stuff, but you weren't, right?
It was pretty ugly when in those early days of radio.
You think people know, though?
Oh, yeah. You realize that you've got a long...
Do you have any old audio files of yourself from years ago? I won't ask.
There's got to be a box there somewhere that's got
some old cassettes or 8-tracks or something.
Yeah, definitely.
I had a couple more questions, and then it's open mic. We can talk about whatever we want. But advice for young folks looking to get into agriculture, farm broadcasting.
I think there's a great career. We had an intern this summer, and it was just fun to kind of see it through fresh eyes, someone coming into this business. I would say maybe a surprising thing is I would work on your writing more than anything. I'm a huge believer in journalism is really based in writing. So back in the day, it was called rip and read. You went to the UPI or AP and you ripped off the paper off of that, and that was the story you read. At the Red River Farm Network.
Rip and read. I've never heard of that.
That was the way of broadcasting. Yeah, we all rip and read. That's the way it was. At the Red River Farm Network, everything we do is written. We spend a lot of time on the written word, and we work on that a lot, on making sure that the written word is very important to what we do. Get in the business. I think find some mentors out there. There's a lot of us, and we'd love to be able to help bring new people into this business. The National Association of Farm Broadcasting actually has our foundation has a scholarship program. I believe they're giving 5 or 6 scholarships away each year. I mean, thousands of dollars that go out, and it's a great way to get a good feel for what's in this business.
Where do you think your career goes? You turned 60 this year. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I mean, you're totally energetic. You get up before I get up a few hours after you, and you stay up later than most people. I mean, could you envision yourself not doing what you do, I guess, is the question.
Like I said at the start, I love what I do. I love getting up.
So you never worked a day of your life?
Yeah. I get to play radio. That's fun. Good question. You're looking for that next generation to come in.
It's not going to be your kids. I've met your family.
Yeah.
The kids are all doing well.
Yeah. I've got 2 boys, 5 grandkids.
Wonderful
They're
wife.
all doing wonderful. My bride is...
you better mention her. She's got to
exactly
get after
right.
you. She'll listen and go, you know what? That's really great. Right up to where you forgot to mention me.
No.
And,
it's an important part of our business.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of opportunities. I would have never envisioned meeting you probably 6-7 years ago, walking in that tent, the Big Iron Farm Show, cold September day. And I was fascinated that you guys were just at a booth, and you asked me to be on, and you interviewed me. And this is when it clicked on. This is when I kind of changed my mind. And I feel like that was about the same time with the AM's going to disappear. I looked at you, and I said, these poor guys don't have an idea. I kind of looked at you guys, don't take this wrong way, but you're going to. Anytime someone says, don't take this the wrong way, they're about ready to insult you. I almost looked at radio guys as like floor traders. And when I was on the floor, I knew it was going to go electronic. So I left way before all those cats. And they stayed to the very end. And when I say they stayed to the end, some of these guys stayed till the CME group, City of Chicago, shut it down for the pandemic. Hey, let's take 14 months off. And then, oh, by the way, we're not coming back. I mean, they stayed to the end. And for some reason, lack of education on my part, I'll take credit on that. I thought what you guys were doing was going away, except for when I sat at your broadcast booth. I was new up here working with farmers and commodity brokerage, and I went on the radio live. And when I got off the radio, I had 3 texts from 3 of my favorite clients who are very successful farmers here in North Dakota and one in Minnesota. To say, I just heard you on the Red River Farm Network. That changed my mind, and it's allowed me to work with you, advertise with you, tag along and watch what you do, even come to you a year and a half ago and say, hey, I want to buy microphones, cameras, and start a podcast about agriculture in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota. And you probably, I know you laughed, but you also came down and, for as much as I was laughing at you 7 years ago, you could laugh at me now, because I guess I just want to be you. I want to, but not quite 3:30 in the morning, Don Wick. 3:30 in the afternoon, record a podcast once in a while. And the nice thing about doing this is that I would feel incredible pressure if I had to do what you do.
You talked earlier about where you saw the business at that time. I think if you look at life, there's 2 ways to do it. You either adapt or you fail, right? And if you're not changing throughout your entire career and trying new things and looking at different avenues, different approaches, you're going to end up failing. And that's not the track you want to go. I think if I was still doing farm broadcasting the way I did 40 years ago, I'd be, it wouldn't be working.
Brings me a great point. Who were your mentors? Who were people you looked up to back in the day? They may have passed.
So I grew up in western Wisconsin, and WAXX, W-A-X-X in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, 104 on the dial, the FM dial. It was Jerry Erdahl and Bob Bosold were the broadcasters there, and that's what we listened to religiously. So that was who I tuned into. I remember being interviewed at the county fair, and that was the big thing. But you can only, as someone coming into this business in farm broadcasting, you have to look at someone like, you have to look at Orion. That was the big kahuna out there that you had to look at. That's got to be the mentor for just about everybody. And then as I got involved in broadcasting, there's others. Taylor Brown at the Northern Ag Network, somebody that I've always looked up to and respect his work. Let me tell you a story about Orion.
I got time.
So
I love it.
Yeah.
Make sure the producer's not texting us, or I'll just give him a wave. There he is.
There we go. My first job in radio, Wabasha, Minnesota, little station, and I got a field for a job that was in Austin, Minnesota, but it was dependent on having membership in the National Association of Farm Broadcasting. I had done all the paperwork. It was a kind of a job to get into the organization. You had to have someone approve it and everything else. Had done all the work, but we got to the point where the station had to pay my dues to get in, and it was $75 at the time. I was making probably $500-600 a month at that point. $75, we didn't have to be spending on my membership. I needed the station to pay for that. So the Austin radio station said, "We want to hire you, but we need you to have that membership." I'm about the only guy that ever lied and cheated to get in the National Association of Farm Broadcasters.
This is good. This is the dirt. This is what we're looking for, America, right here, right now. We make sure the tape's running. Yeah, it's going.
Paperwork's all signed. We're all ready to go, and we knew we had to get it done. My wife, you've met Colleen. I can still picture it. She's sitting on the little stool.
She's
in the little tiny kitchen we had.
Accessory to a crime.
She was the person behind it. So she's on the phone, called the radio station was based in Wabasha, or was in Wabasha where I worked. It was based in Preston, Minnesota. She called and talked to the bookkeeper in Preston and said that she was Orion Samuelson's secretary, because that was the only name we knew in farm broadcasting at the time, and that we've gone through all the work. We've got Don Wick's application here, but if he doesn't pay the dues within the next week, we're going to have to reject it. And the bookkeeper said, well, our station general manager or whatever wasn't there at the time. She's like, well, then we're just going to have to reject it. So they paid the $75. My membership came through, and the next week I took a job in Austin, Minnesota. So
that's a classic. That's just the stuff you don't get out in 2-3 minute interviews. I like that. That's beautiful. That's the dark side of Don. If you've listened to podcasts this long, you just heard the dark side of Don. I love it. That's wonderful. Well, there's all types of tricks, but it shows your passion for what you're doing and your wife's support to say, no, I'll help you.
We're going to get me all the way.
Real exactly. Does she do taxes, by the way? I mean, come on now. That's awesome. Well, the IRS is looking to hire 86,000 people, and maybe she could be one of them. That's wild. Well, there's some.
I shared that story with Orion about.
I was going to ask you, does he know?
Later.
Yeah. Did he laugh?
Yeah, he, gave you a good chuckle that you'd expect from Orion. So
yeah. What do you think of this podcasting stuff? Not just the vocal, but the video part's very new. It what I had noticed was I tried to search video agriculture podcast, and there's been some phenomenal young farmers who took it to the next level, and they're what we would call like vlogging, and that we can go through the whole list. People out there watching and listening know all these people, and I had a chance at the Farm Progress show to meet some of these guys, and they're and gals too. There's a young gal, Laura Farms, Cale Carlson's daughter, and their lives have changed. I mean, when I say changed, when they smile and say, "I had no idea." I haven't met this young man. There's this young man named Cole the Cornstar, which is funny in itself. I feel embarrassed in saying it. He has 550,000 subscribers. He releases a video and he has 250,000 views within hours. Millennial farmers, same thing. Other farmers. What do you think of that stuff?
I think it's just social media and podcasting has just opened the world where anybody can be a journalist or anybody can be a broadcaster or really be in the it's that mix of entertainment and information. I think that's really cool, and because we're doing just like we're doing in farm broadcasting, it's that niche. You're talking to a very specific audience.
It's interesting because I didn't actually. Some of these people I didn't know who they were till 3 months ago, 6 months ago. I told some friends I'm starting a podcast about agriculture. Want to be a champion for agriculture. When they said, what's your motto going to be? I said, a champion for agriculture. Sounds good enough. And then I realized there's a lot of individual farmers who are doing this. And what's interesting in my view is how much farmers want to watch other farmers. It's like cooks watching other cooks. Let's watch the cooking show. How do they do it? And it's opened up a whole world. I mean, you could know everything about a Texas farm and never have been to Texas. You could be raising strawberries in California, and no one wants to go to California right now. Now maybe you do want to go to California. Go wherever you want. It's America. But there's some interesting things that have happened, and that
it kind of pulls back the curtain, and you can see what somebody else is doing. Anytime I can get a chance to go into a radio station or into a studio or into what you're doing here, I love that because that's my business. Same thing for farmers. They want to see what's going on in another operation, and maybe they learn something, or maybe they get a chuckle or whatever. But it's that shared experience.
I will tell you and add to that, when you go to YouTube and you search one of these ag YouTube sensations and you go to videos and you hit popular, the most popular videos are of them breaking stuff. I don't know if they're breaking on purpose to get hits, but if they say tractor in a ditch, it's got 2 million views. And those millions of views actually equate to advertising dollars. And as you watch these YouTube videos, you could see their intros and outros. Here we have Colorado Jack. We had to start somewhere. We also have...
That's pretty cool, Colorado Jack. That's great stuff.
Yeah. Say Colorado Jack in the Don Wick voice. We'll save it for the B-roll.
Colorado Jack, huh?
There you go. But I will say this. People like yourself and others have been ultra supportive. The banks were at First State Bank in Mayville, North Dakota, and they have branches in Grand Forks, Thompson, Buxton, Mayville, Portland, North Dakota, all towns no one's ever heard of unless you're from here. But for what we're doing and for them to allow us to use this, it was funny when it started. So I want to start a little podcast, and I just might need a little bit of space, like a corner of the basement. And the president of the bank came down the other day. He's like, you took the whole damn basement. I'm like, well, I mean, what are you going to do here? Yeah. Then we filmed some stuff. You and I filmed some stuff, and when's it going to come out? I'm like, that one? That ain't ever going to come out. There was nothing wrong necessarily with the content of us talking, but I just didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like the lights. I didn't like this, and we're still working on stuff. I have a load of parts that are coming in here in an hour. I just can't get into the stand. I think I ordered some arms, different arms I had that are very low profile, and we'll see what they look like on camera. But I like having an arm and being able to adjust the microphone. I feel like this is very stiff, and and I've seen you, when you sit in that seat at your desk, you're like a race car driver. You got your buttons, you got your knobs, you got your mic. There's no lights, right? It could be dark, and you seem like you're in your element. When are you not in your element? When are you uncomfortable? I have a feeling this makes you a little uncomfortable.
Makes you very uncomfortable.
Why is that? Don't do the face for radio joke. No one's gonna go there.
Think about it, Tommy. Though I spend my job sitting in a small room, all by myself, talking. It's
across from the fire department. If anything goes wrong, they can walk across the street. I'm having an anxiety attack. I'm on the radio. This is Don Wick with the Red River Farm Network.
I think myself and a lot of broadcasters are actually very introverted. It's a little strange, but working in a small room, talking to yourself is what we do each and every day, and that's more my comfort level than having Tommy Grisafi do an interview with me. So,
but I am uncomfortable sitting here too, but we had to get started.
Yep.
You have to do episode 1. You're not going to like it. Episode 2.
You step
We've
up.
We've done
right?
several audio podcasts. There's some I like, some I don't. They're all unique. I'm constantly writing notes of what I could do better, And
but you're telling stories, and you got a great way of doing that, Tommy.
The story isn't with me. The story is you. The story is having your wife do that to get to be Orient secretary. Or the story is that I didn't know the one out of high school that you just literally popped out of there. And one thing, on a sad note, you've spent one time in your career unemployed. Let's talk about the dark side real quick, where you were married, you had kids, and you didn't have a job, which is such a wild concept here in America. Because if you want a job, there's work right now, correct?
Correct.
But what happened then? What year was that?
So that would have been 2002 or 2003, just about 20 years ago. So yeah, I was working at WCCO in downtown Minneapolis, a legacy AM radio station, fantastic radio station. And I had been there about 7 years. In fact, that week I just got back from England. Syngenta had a fellowship for broadcasters or for journalists, and you're feeling kind of full of yourself.
You just saw the Queen.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Younger version of her.
We saw the
clock, Big Ben.
It's all the good stuff in London,
yeah,
right?
all the stuff.
But you're feeling good about your career, those kind of things. It's a wonderful time. And so I get back, I think, like on a Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it was. On Friday, I get called. I get a buzz on the intercom. They wanted me to come upstairs, and I didn't think anything of it. But I walk upstairs, and it's
maybe a grammar mistake.
Yeah, whatever.
You know,
it's the general manager, the program director, the HR rep. It was a union shop, so our union representative was there. I'm like, what am I walking into? And they were eliminating the farm department. And
could be a problem for a farm broadcaster.
That's exactly right. So that as of that day, I was out of the farm broadcasting business, and yeah, that's a tough thing to do. And I went home and I called Mike Hergert, who started the Red River Farm Network along with John Vosacek and Jerry Fiscom, my partners here when I came, and said if I want to stay in farm broadcasting, I want to be at the Red River Farm Network because they were doing it right. When I was at WCCO, decisions were being made in New York because it was owned by CBS at the time. It's nice being in a place where you can control your own destiny, and that's what I saw Mike doing at the Red River Farm Network. So actually, it took them some time to add another salary to their staff. It probably took 3-4 months before that finally came into reality. And during that time, I'm applying for jobs all over the place. I had applied for some small market radio station jobs. I actually had a nice offer for a job at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and I'm being wined and dined by the ag commissioner. I'm feeling really, this is kind of cool. But I went and was in the ag department offices, place I'd been many times, but it's like, this isn't who I am. I'm a reporter. I have a hard time thinking that all I was going to do was tell somebody else's story, tell it from the commissioner's standpoint or the administration standpoint, and not being able to
There'd be a little agenda there with that job, right?
Yeah, exactly. And nothing wrong with that. That's
Someone's out there doing it right now.
Exactly. And they're doing it great, and it's important. I work with them all the time, but
of course,
it wasn't something that I had in my heart. You talked about passion. I love what I do, and I wanted to stay in farm broadcasting. So it was a few months, but yeah, when you're not getting up and going to work every morning, it's a tough go.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's pretty good. Well, we have to end the show somewhere. I think I did a better job than last time. No one will ever know that. I know you did a better job than last time in the sense that we're both more relaxed. But I see you every few weeks or month. I do want to thank you. I had never, that I could remember, ever put headphones on and spoke on a mic until I was both in your studio and in that booth at Big Iron. And rightfully so. All this stuff, which there's 3 times more stuff around here that people can't see. They just see us. They don't see what's behind us. They don't see all the other stuff working. And the people working behind us. And somehow you helped me catch the bug. And you also made me realize how important radio is, and to have a platform to say what you want, even if it may not be what everyone else wants. I mean, anybody out there can go buy mics and get a little service to host their podcast and ask a 12-year-old how to edit, although it gets very complicated. But there's these younger kids seem to get it and take it to the next level. And this is just not what I thought my life would be like, but it's a good thing. So I say, everyone, God's got a plan. I guess it was to be in Mayville, North Dakota, sitting next to Don Wick today, which isn't a bad deal.
I applaud you. It's you're a go-getter, Tommy. You're a great friend. I appreciate working with you.
Well, thank you, Don. Well, we'll wrap it up. I think we'll do this again. You and I will have a lot to talk about, and we'll keep doing crop tours, and I can't thank you enough. And so supposed to look in the camera and say, hey, I'm Tom Grisafi, and I'm bullish agriculture.